Let's get right into it. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has been in Kherson today, described as the biggest prize his troops have won so far, and vowing to press on recapturing all occupied lands in the country. Russian forces last week fled Kherson in their third major retreat since invading Ukraine in February, and the first time they've abandoned such a large city. President Zelenskyy addressed troops in front of the administration building in the main square, where residents had also turned out, some with children, some waving Ukrainian flags or draped in them. He then commemorated fallen soldiers and watched Ukrainian flag being raised over the administration building. Kherson was one of the 4 provinces of Russian President Vladimir Putin annexed last month and said would be part of Russia forever. The loss of the regional capital is a major psychological and strategic blow for Moscow. And much earlier, President Zelenskyy told the Ukrainians the army was moving step by step across the country.
Here's my mic.
This is the beginning of the end of the war. You see our strong army. We are step by step coming to our country, to all the temporary occupied territories. And of course, it's a pity, but it's a long way, difficult way, because this war took the best heroes of our country. And so, but for us, it's very understandable. We don't believe Russia, yes, and they're tricking with all the world. That's why we are going forward. We're ready for peace, but our peace for our country is all our country, all our territory. We respect the law and respect sovereignty of all the countries, but now we are speaking about our countries. That's why we are fighting against Russian aggression.
Meanwhile, Ukrainians in Kherson have been celebrating and celebrated over the weekend the regaining of the city from the Russians, also slowly getting back to their lives as normal as possible. The city still has a shortage of water, food and power, but residents say they're ready to suffer as long as they remain in Ukraine and also in Kherson. Kherson is lacking water not just for drinking, but for everyday use as well, such as washing dishes or even laundry. Many are looking past their present conditions to focus on the victory and on not being under Russian authority. In the meantime, EU foreign ministers today held talks with Belarusian leaders Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya and the Ukrainian foreign minister Dmytro Kuleba ahead of a meeting focused on Iran and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Today's meeting comes ahead of talks with the defense ministers tomorrow. The foreign ministers are discussing a long-term approach to Moscow since the EU's past strategy, which saw selective engagement with Russia. On diplomats say no decision is expected yet. Tomorrow's meeting will be among the EU defense ministers, where they're likely to launch a military assistance mission to Ukraine aimed at training some 15,000 Ukrainian troops.
The serious allegations that has been directed towards the Iranian government for selling drones to Russia to be used in the war in Ukraine is something which we have to look very closely into. And for my part, as Foreign Minister of Sweden, I believe that sanctions are necessary in order to curtail these ambitions by the Iranian government. We have to show a very, very clear sign and send strong signals to Tehran that the use of drones against Ukraine is absolutely out of the question, and that trade has to stop.
The peace in Ukraine can only come under Ukrainian terms. The speculations that we found in public sphere, I think they are unhelpful, and therefore it is important that Europe sends a very clear message that we will support Ukraine to the peace that it will be settled by them.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says it's up to Ukraine now to decide what terms are acceptable for negotiations to bring an end to the war Russia is waging against the country, warning that Moscow's strength should not be underestimated despite Kyiv's recent battlefield success. And that comment comes after President Zelenskyy's visit to the newly recaptured southern city of Kherson. Meanwhile, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says he can neither confirm nor deny a report that Russian and U.S. officials are holding talks in the Turkish capital, Ankara. Excuse me, some Russian local media had reported the delegations from the two countries are meeting today in Ankara. Head of Russia's DVR Foreign Intelligence Agency was reportedly part of the Russian delegation. Peskov also said that work to renew the Black Sea grain export deal was ongoing, and the talks with the United Nations last week were also fairly constructive. Joining me now is the chargé d'affaires at the Ukrainian embassy in Abuja here in Nigeria, Soltys Bohdan. Thank you, Soltys, for making time to speak with us this evening.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
How do you feel, tell us, how you feel knowing now that the Russian troops have left Kherson, one of the regions that were recently annexed, supposedly, by Russia?
Well, of course, it gives me joy that Russian troops withdrew, that the Ukrainian army was able to cast them away from Kherson. At the same time, I'm very sad understanding that this liberation of Kherson came with a price, that many people died, many soldiers, patriots died liberating Kherson. Also, the territory of Kherson was under, when it was under Russian occupation, Russians introduced the reign of terror. So a lot of people were killed and tortured. So of course I'm sad because of this. But still, it gives me pleasure to see that the good is overcoming evil, and that Ukrainian territory is being liberated.
Indeed. And the Russian troops are said to be on the west bank of the Dnieper River. Just yesterday, the governor of Kherson did warn that there could be Russian attacks today. He even cautioned people against gathering in large numbers. Do you fear as well that the Russians will be relaunching an attack against Kherson to regain control of the region?
Well, first of all, I think they're on the eastern side of the Dnieper River.
Right.
So, of course, there is danger that Russia will launch attack again, and it is very likely that Russia will continue their terroristic attacks, bombarding Ukrainian cities, in this case, particularly Kherson, killing civilians and destroying Ukrainian essential infrastructure. Of course, this danger remains, and actually this is what Russia has been doing all along. Russia is attacking Ukrainian cities, bombarding them, killing civilians, killing children, women, killing everybody. These are terrorist methods in doing this.
So you do agree that Russia is carrying out an act of terrorism on Ukraine, because some international experts are saying Russia has to pay for these crimes?
Absolutely, of course.
Right, and President Zelenskyy, who was in Kherson earlier today, spoke to the army. He said that they're step by step going through the country. First of all, it's Kherson. Do you honestly think it was the Ukrainian military that did push out the Russians from Kherson, or that the Russians realized that they would lose woefully in Kherson, and then the Russian President Vladimir Putin, in order to avoid total disgrace, did pull troops out of Kherson?
Yes, the Russian soldiers were driven away by the Ukrainian army, and we did this. Our brave soldiers did this. And we also thank very much international community for providing us with the weapons which enabled to do this. So yes, the Russian army retreated from Kherson because they understood that otherwise they would suffer a very bad defeat.
You spoke about weapons, and, Iran has been denying that it provided weapons for the use of this war, saying that those drones that it gave to Russia were sent long before the Russian invasion happened on February 24. Do you believe that Iran is telling the truth at this time, or you think that Iran did connive with Russia to carry out this invasion on Ukraine?
No, I don't believe Iran. I'm sure that Iran connived with Russia and supplied Russia with weapons, which Russia used in Ukraine to kill women, children, civilian population, and destroy Ukrainian cities, Ukrainian infrastructure.
So this war has been going on for more than 8 months, so just about 8 months, and we're gradually approaching the end of the year. Do you think Ukraine can still win this war against Russia?
Yes, because good always overcomes evil. Russia is the evil empire who started aggressive war just because of the ambitions of their leader. Russia wants to take more and more territories and restore the evil empire Soviet Union.
Can you speak?
And yes, we will be fighting, and we will win because we are, yes.
Well, sorry for interrupting you, but can you speak to, the accusations that Ukrainian authorities were indeed fighting separatists in the Donbas region, which is one of the reasons why Russia invaded Ukraine, because the people in the Donbas are Russian-speaking, and they say that nobody's talking about, the atrocities the Ukrainian authorities have committed against the people who live in that region and the others.
This is all Russian propaganda. I'm sure you could see the videos where residents of formerly occupied territories are meeting Ukrainian soldiers with flowers. And those people who were under Russian occupation tell really horrible stories, which are unfortunately true.
When the war is over, Soltys, what would happen to...
After Russian troops were pushed away from...
Yeah, we do seem to be having a problem with the connection there with Soltys. But Soltys, if you can hear me, thank you. Thank you so much.
Can you hear me?
Well, now we can. Now we can.
Yes,
now we can hear you. Okay, so just very quickly before, something happens again to the network, when the war is over, what would happen? What would happen to those areas that were already, where the referendum took place in Ukraine? Kherson was one of them, Zaporizhia as well. The other two areas that were, which voted in favor of Russian rule. What would happen, when the war is over and Ukraine supposedly retakes all the territories? Russia still has a hold on those regions, doesn't it?
Well, currently these territories are occupied by Russia, but these are Ukrainian territories, according to international law. And the population who lives there are Ukrainians, and they want to be with Ukraine. These so-called referendums were conducted under the arms, when the soldiers were pulling arms on people. So these referendums have no validity according to international law, according to Ukrainian law, according to the principles of humanity.
Soltys, I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening and for making time to answer all of our questions. We have so many, as always, as we learn of the situation in Ukraine. We know you're keeping in touch, with family and friends back home. We hope they're as safe as you are here in Nigeria.